Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 10th of June, 2024, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish, and I'm delighted to have with me in the studio Diane, Rasmussen, McAdie, and also Mark Anderson. So welcome to you both. Welcome to UK Column News. Thank you for joining me today. And I'd just like to say happy birthday to anybody who's got a birthday today, the 10th of June. Well, we're going to kick off with a little bit of a talk about politics as we run up to the election, and what better place to start than a picture with Rishi himself. So this is from the Tory party website. He's looking very slick and relaxed, no tie, of course, because that helps him appear as to be one of the ordinary people in UK, even though there's billions in the background with his family. But this is how the Tories are pushing forward for the election. And we have a look at a bit more of the detail. It says if we want to change our country, we have to change the way we do politics. Well, I certainly agree we need to change the way we do politics. And we're going to try and show our viewers and listeners today a little bit about the reality of politics in the UK. But he says for the last 30 years, politicians have resorted to short-term political decision-making, taking the easy way out rather than fixing the underlying problems. I'm going to say, to me, the underlying problem is the fact that we have a political system which is rotten. He says, as Prime Minister, I will make the hard but necessary long-term decisions to get the country on the right path for a brighter future. Well, of course, the country's been broken by the political system itself, but he's apparently going to halve inflation. That'll be interesting because he's not in control of the banks. He's going to grow the economy. That'll be very interesting because he doesn't want to support businesses. He's going to reduce debt. Well, again, he doesn't control the banks, so that's not going to happen. And he's going to cut waiting lists to get people the care they need more quickly. This is coming from a political party that's worked hard to destroy the NHS system. And he's going to stop the boats, even though the boats are only here because of failures of migration policy within both Conservative and the Labour government. But if we move on through, this is how the website looks. It's very clean and bright and clear. And that's appropriate because they've got a clear plan of bold action for a secure future. That means that they've stirred up wars, particularly now in the Middle East and with the Russians. And so they're going to have to deal with that, but they're making progress. But the key thing is they never say where that progress is ultimately going to lead to. And I'm going to suggest it's a global agenda. It's not to do with national politics. But if you want the real detail, it's here. Clear plan, bold action, secure future. This almost takes us back to COVID-19 lockdown with a three-phrase mantra: clear plan, bold action, secure future. And of course, if we have a look at the detail here, they're going to raise defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030. But we're also going to introduce national service for 18-year-olds. We're going to see the Rwanda plan through. We're going to deal with inflation. We're going to abolish national insurance. We're going to fix the NHS. We're going to guarantee a pension triple lock. And we're going to double free childcare. That's if they're not stealing your children in the first place. So it's pretty slick from the Tories. Not a lot of detail on how these things are going to be done. But of course, we're back to promises to the general public. And then if we go Labour, well, Labour is a lot simpler to understand because it's to do with kissing babies. And here's Keir Starmer cuddling a toddler. Would I allow my child to be cuddled by Keir Starmer? I think not. I don't trust him in any shape or form. But of course, what is he up to? Well, our mission is driven government. Our mission-driven government will restore pride and purpose in our country. And on Thursday, the 4th of July, he can make this a reality together. It's time to be part of a change. But of course, the change and more change that the political parties are talking about ultimately leads us to a state of ever changing, and that is indeed revolution. And UK Column has warned on a number of occasions that what we're really dealing with is a political system that is designed to create breakdown and chaos, to bring in complete revolutionary change. And it was only a few days ago on the UK column news that we talked about Eric Pickles, former communities minister, actually saying he was an unlikely revolutionary, but the revolution started with him. So encourage people to do some checking up. But let's have a look at the power behind the throne. And of course, the politicians on either side are just the political puppets. We'll bring in the key players, Rishi and of course Keir Starmer. But the power is in the wings. It's the party funders for the Conservatives, lots of embarrassment with Russian money. It's the power of the whips. It's the power of the BBC and the mainstream media who only support the key parties. And it's to do with the power of Israel and friends of Israel. And ultimately now we've got the pressure of war. It's exactly the same system on the Labour side. And the one we'll bring in that covers both of them is the Remembrancer. And we'll be talking about the Remembrancer in a bit, but essentially this is the power base of the City of London in Westminster itself. Let's have a look, though, at the whips and how they function. We've got a couple of little video clips here.
When MPs vote in the House of Commons, they almost always vote the same way as their party. It's the job of the party whips to make sure this happens. But recently the whip's power has come under threat, and record numbers of MPs have rebelled against their own party. The most rebellious MPs have become known as the Awkward Squad. One such member is the Tory Peter Bone. Since the last election, he's voted against the government nearly 150 times.
When there's a division bell rings in the House of Commons, there are 600 MPs who are going to vote. Most MPs have no idea what's being debated in the House of Commons, and they turn up and the whips tell them which lobby to go through.
The whip's job is to keep their MPs united behind the party leader and to quell rebellions by the independent-minded.
Food labelling. Now, this is our policy, so if a vote is called, we expect that everybody will be able to participate in that, and if necessary, we'll put tellers in.
So the man claims the MPs don't know what they're voting for, and I think he's right, and they're controlled. Let's have a look at how that clip on the whips progressed.
The whips like to keep secret the way they work. But the Labour Chief Whip, Rosie Winterton, has invited us into her lair.
So this is the Opposition Chief Whip's office, and there's the whip. It's good, isn't it? I only use it on the members when they're especially well behaved. I haven't actually murdered anybody yet. There are no thumb screws in here, as you will have probably noticed. Well, I'll get them out later if you want. So, you know, the popular image is of rather a sinister operation, whereas actually what we do like to do is to convince people because we think the arguments are right.
So it was the smirk on her face that did it for me. She knows full well the power of the whips and what they actually do. But if our viewers and listeners are not convinced today, let's have a look at a third clip from the BBC themselves about another whip within the Conservative Party. Let's listen to what he has to say about how the system works.
The government whips build up dossiers of information, both political and personal, about their flocks. And the whips also act as a kind of welfare agency for MPs. One Tory whip claims they perform 1,000 acts of unremarked kindness each year for Tory MPs who face personal problems.
Anyone with any sense who was in trouble would come to the whips and tell them the truth. They'd say, no, I'm in a jam, can you help? It might be debt, it might be scandal involving small boys, or any kind of scandal which a member seemed likely to be mixed up in. They'd come and ask if we could help. And if we could, we did. And we would do everything we can because we would store up brownie points. That sounds a pretty nasty reason, but it's one of the reasons. Is if we can get a chap out of trouble, then he'll do as we ask forevermore.
So there we have a whip calmly talking about blackmail, the blackmailing of members of parliaments in order to get them to do as they want. The key question is, who is they? Let's just have a look at this. We'll have to save the detail for another day. But of course, we need to have a look at where the money comes from for the parties, because invariably the people who fund the parties control the party system at all, control the whole party system, so they have the power base. And we need to follow this through, but we'll come on to that for another day. We'll just end this segment with this little video clip of Rishi talking about Israel.
I want to thank you for your solidarity, your clear, unwavering support from the minute this war began. I think the fact that you came to Israel tells us a lot. I said to President Biden yesterday that there's one thing more heartwarming than standing with Israel, it's standing in Israel. And the fact that you came here to do that is a very strong statement of support, which we deeply appreciate.
So I can now ask the key question, to whom does Rishi owe loyalty, the people of UK or Israel? Are we to know? And if we're concerned about the situation with the Tories, then it's the same with Labour. An article from The Standard here, one of the main reasons why Keir Starmer is standing firm on Israel, his family, the Labour leader's resolution will be stiffened by having a Jewish wife and relatives. So what is the truth? What do these people really believe? We have no idea. But of course, we see powerful people in the wings. And are they always our friend? Mark, let's bring you in. I've stolen a little bit of your time today, but I thought it was important to get that information out about politics in UK. But we can't always trust Israel.
Very true. Good day, Diane and Brian. I'm going to get into a little bit of history here, but it actually has a lot of current relevance. And this is about Israel's deliberate attack on a naval ship, the USS Liberty, on the 8th of June, 1967. So that anniversary just passed. I wanted to get it recognized this year. There's a little clip here on this slide that is taken from some of the communications of Israel's military forces on that fateful day in the Mediterranean Sea off the Sinai Peninsula. But sir, it's an American ship. The reply, never mind, hit her. And let's move on from there. And what we have is some basic facts. This is my own writing that I got from various sources. On the 8th of June, 1967, during the Six-Day War, without warning, Israeli jets and torpedo boats launched an attack on the USS Liberty. 34 U.S. sailors were killed. Another 171 sailors were wounded in this attack by Israeli aircraft and torpedo boats. A CIA memo, which I had never seen before, I just found it yesterday, by the way, which was not declassified until 2006, June of that year, correctly noted the Liberty was a naval technical research ship, but falsely claimed the attack was a case of mistaken identity. The very same memo states that 2 Israeli Delta Wing jet fighters orbited and surveyed the clearly flagged Liberty at 9:50 a.m. local time near the Sinai Peninsula, but did not attack the ship until over 5 hours later in broad daylight with clear weather. So they knew full well what it was. Survivors such as Phil Turney knew firsthand, and they and Dave Gahary and other honest investigators determined that this was an Israeli attempt to sink a U.S. vessel as a false flag / provocateur operation to try and draw the U.S. into Israel's war with Egypt. And here's the key part. This is very interesting. The war ended with Israel in control of the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. So you might say the dials were preset, Brian, in terms of what's going on in Gaza now, at least to a degree, because of this event. Now, this next slide shows Phil Turney, one of the key survivors. I met him and spoke alongside of him at a conference in Seguin, Texas in 2018. And he had just put out this book with Dave Gerrish called Erasing the Liberty. And another survivor called it the most detailed book on the liberty I have ever seen. And it's the true story of innocence, murder, and betrayal of the most decorated ship in U.S. Navy history. Get that? Hidden for well over 50 years. And I'll mention, before we, I believe, listen to a short musical ballad about the Liberty, I'll mention, Brian, that there was a call finally made to the Liberty to get help, and jet fighters were on their way across the Mediterranean, and they were called back by President Johnson. They were literally called off to defend the Liberty, and Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense, a higher up at the Pentagon anyway at that time, also concurred to call off that assistance to protect the Liberty. A very disgraceful thing, and the U.S. government doesn't really recognize at all Israel's true responsibility in this. And to this day, Congress wants to bring Prime Minister Netanyahu out of Israel and have him speak to Congress, where they'll give him constant standing ovations despite what's been happening in Gaza, the massive killing by the Israeli army against largely innocent Gazans, of course, most of whom have nothing to do with Hamas, and Hamas is not an organized army anyway, not a mechanized army like Israel in any way, shape, or form. So for Congress to do that now with such a moral breach is pretty unconscionable in most people's eyes. But anyway, ifamericans.knew.org, I'll mention real quick, is another really interesting website that can give a lot more details about the massive aid that the U.S. has been giving Israel all along. But the USS Liberty, to this day, to a large extent, Brian, is still a cover-up. So back to you.
Mark, thank you very much. I'm going to hold the little music clip until extra time. We're going to be talking about this segment more in UK column extra, but I'll hold that clip. Let's just finish off our segment on UK politics. And of course, I wanted to flag up with the audience the fact that we don't even know to whom Keir Starmer is actually loyal. It may be Israel, maybe it's a completely different set of people. Let's hear what he had to say about Davos.
Let us just ask you quickly, you have to choose now between Davos or Westminster?
Davos.
Why?
Because Westminster is too constrained. And, it's closed and we're not having meaning. Once you get out of Westminster, whether it's Davos or anywhere else, you actually engage with people that you can see working with in the future. Westminster is just a tribal shouting place.
So he's not going to set to and clear up the mess that's politics, British politics in Westminster and make it work. He's simply going to walk away to his rich friends in Davos and play with that team of people. So what he's really saying is absolutely no loyalty to UK whatsoever. And it's in his own words. But if we really want to understand the power base around politicians in UK and indeed other places in the Western world, let's have a look at this clip going back to the UK column some years ago, where Mike Robinson is talking about the Remembrancer.
All right. But when you go and look at the City of London website and actually read what it says here, the current Remembrancer is Paul Double. The Remembrancer is one of the city's 4 law officers, and the office is responsible for the maintenance and protection of the city's constitution. It is the city's parliamentary agent and the parliamentary agent for the Honourable the Irish Society, and the city's chief of protocol. The office was created in 1571. In its early years, it was closely allied to the monarch and the court. And this is reflected in some of its functions today, which include liaison between the city and the royal households. The office acts as a channel of communication between Parliament and the city. So it's a channel of communication between Parliament and the city. In the contemporary context, this means day-to-day examination of parliamentary business, including examination of and briefing on proposed legislation and amendments to it. So the Wikipedia article says that they get no rights to look at legislation before it is made public, yet the website says that they get to examine parliamentary business, including examination of and briefing on proposed legislation and amendments to it, regular liaison with the select committee committees of both houses and contact with officials in government departments detailing with parliamentary bills. Liaison is also maintained with the City Office in Brussels and other member states' permanent representations in relation to draft EU legislation. So here we see the relationship between the City of London, which is the most corrupt organisation, or at least place on the planet perhaps, and its relationship with parliamentary legislative process in Britain, but not just in Britain, in the European Union as well.
So there we are, the City of London, direct influence, even before Parliament has made decisions, it's there influencing what happens in the best interests of the financial interests of the City of London. Let's have a look at the second part of that clip.
And Lucas in 2013 called for the Remembered Sir to be expelled from the House of Commons. And she wrote to John Bercow, who's the Speaker, asking him to consider removing the Remembered Sir from the floor of the House and to end the Remembered Sir's privileges to view legislation during the drafting process. The House of Commons Library then advised that the Remembered Sir's privilege access to the House of Commons is not given by legislation, is under the total control of the Speaker, but the Speaker has done absolutely nothing to remove this insidious lobbying.
So it couldn't be more clear. Who's pulling the strings of power? Well, of course, it's the people who control the money, either through the global business interests of the City of London and or by the people who fund the parties themselves. But just to end this clip, I want to say to the audience once again, if you can't understand what political words or statements mean, and this is particularly important as we run up to the election, try considering them in light of the concept that the words mean the exact opposite of what they appear to mean, or try considering the words in light of the concept that we're being attacked by our own government. I'll end the segment there. And Diane, let's bring you in because you're talking about the subject of, truth and facts.
Yes, thanks, Mike, Brian, everyone involved in today's show. I wanted to start out by saying that in the last few weeks since we've launched UKC Verify, we've put out calls for viewers to potentially suggest things that we could fact check, anything that's in the mainstream media, mainstream news. So here's one that I received last week. There's been a lot of activity in my Twitter account, which again, please follow me at DIANE UKC, Diane UKC, where I'm asking for people to give me things that they would like to have fact checked. So here's one that came up last week, saying a great thing to verify would be the claim that COVID jabs saved millions of lives, particularly as they are now finally admitting their totally safe claim is indeed at best extremely tenuous. They are now even saying vaccine safety is a relative concept. And he's retweeted here a post from Dr. Claire Craig. So I thought about this for a couple of days. How can I address this? And then I sort of came across a few pieces of academic research. This is a preprint study, so not fully peer-reviewed yet, based on UK data of thousands of children around the effectiveness of COVID vaccination in children and adolescents. And what I said was, well, this doesn't necessarily prove or show us that they are totally safe, but it does show in this study, based on thousands of children here in the UK, that children who have been injected are more likely to need hospitalization. And I also found a couple of more recent studies, including things that have been in the mainstream press, so this is starting to go mainstream here now. This was in the Telegraph last week. And this is the original paper, if you want to see the original source that they cited, saying COVID vaccines may have helped fuel a rise in excess deaths. And again, that paper from BMJ Public Health, the British Medical Journal of Public Health, is a major, huge academic journal. And this is using the Our World in Data set. And I would encourage viewers to go play with this data set, Our World in Data. It's something that I'll be covering here in just a minute as well, that I went to play with, but anyone can access this data. There's a data explorer. You can look at a lot of different factors to see what has influenced things throughout the last few years. And someone that I've been in contact with recently on Twitter and privately is Professor Sander van der Linden. He is a psychology professor of social psychology, I believe, at the University of Cambridge. And he's well known in mainstream media and so on for producing these books around tackling misinformation. How do we fight misinformation? And I can tell you that he is, I would say, potentially more in line with Mariana Spring than he is with UK Column. So he posted this a couple of days ago that he has a new paper that he co-authored in the Nature journal with an all-star team, saying that misinformation poses a bigger threat to democracy than you might think. One of the claims that he has in this paper, or his co-authors might have made, is COVID vaccines have saved millions of lives. So I decided to ask him the question publicly, because I'm, happy to engage in any debate with anyone. Why did you make this claim? Where's the evidence that you got from this? And so I did a really quick search on the Our World with Data COVID Data Explorer, and I found just sort of choosing 3 different nations, high-income countries and 3 low-income countries, and to show that the COVID deaths never really existed in the poor countries. So what exactly is going on there? And he replied to me with a couple of papers, and he said, there's dozens of studies, or tons of studies, dozens of scientific evaluations have concluded this. And he's got a couple of links that he included to academic papers from the last couple of years, which I would say have their own bias to them. For example, saying that, admits as well in these papers, for example, and this is a quote from one of the papers, vaccines had less effect in low-income countries due to inadequate access, emphasizing the importance of global vaccine equity. So they didn't have access to the vaccines, but they almost had no COVID-related deaths, potentially. And that's a potential thing that I looked into further. Can we really say that, or can we not say that? But that was the first thought that came into my head. And then, of course, the other data from the other papers, reports from the WHO. So is that presenting bias, or what is that doing? So once I went into the data myself and I started to play with this data explorer, high-income countries do have more so-called, inverted commas, COVID deaths. Low-income countries had essentially no so-called COVID deaths at all. And you can see here on the graph, as well as in the numbers, that the chart at the top shows the high-income countries with the so-called confirmed COVID deaths, and the one at the bottom with the low-income countries has almost no change in deaths at all whatsoever per million people. And you can also see the percentage, if you look at the bottom, high-income versus low-income country, there's a quite significant change in percentages and numbers in the high-income countries, and no change at all in the low-income countries. So what does this mean? Well, if we go to the next slide here, I'm just asking the question, why at this point? We have high-income countries had higher vaccination deaths and more vaccination rates and more deaths. So why is that? You can look at the high-income versus the low-income countries here again. The high-income countries had, obviously, as we know, a much higher vaccination rate, which Professor Sander van der Linden admits himself. But we also had higher confirmed deaths on a sort of daily basis in the high-income countries. So I would just like to ask the question here, why do we think that is? Well, can we answer that or not? That's sort of still up in question, but we do know for a fact that the high-income deaths were higher than the low-income deaths for whatever reason. Just a couple of other points on vaccine injuries. In Japan, there was a quite substantial protest that went on, and Japan has been in trouble. This was from last year. I think this was covered on UK Column previously. Suspected COVID vaccine deaths were reported as COVID deaths. I believe this was reported last year on NHK. And what I found on Arab News Japan, I had to search a while to find a reliable source for this, to show that this was, in fact, the video of what they said they were saying, that there was a rally in Tokyo around the COVID health regulations from the WHO, which we've covered last week and several weeks before, especially with Mark. So I would just like to show a quick video clip, which I received from Arab News Japan, which is a reliable source, covering part of that protest.
これはおそらく人類史上最悪の薬害に発展するだろうということで、4年前からいい年をして YouTuber をなりました。
ワクチンの問題もそうですけども、今の日本の政治がね、国民に情報を正しく知らせないで何でも言うことを聞けという 姿勢になってきて、それが今回の自民党のスキャンダルで限界が来たと思うんですね。そういう意味で私は憲法学者として緊急事態条項とか地方自治法の改正も政府がこう決めたらみんな黙って従える、この傾向に非常に不安を覚えて、
So we're starting to see there some public admission from public figures of what has happened in Japan. And if you look at the Our World in data from Japan itself as a particular country, I didn't put it in the slides, but if you look at it yourself, you'll see some quite substantial numbers on vaccination rates and deaths and so on in Japan, and specifically. Also on this issue, I saw this tweet, which I shared on my Twitter, and I'm very, very sad that this has happened. I was furious when I first saw this on Friday, but I shared it and it's had thousands of views, which I guess is good, at least that the word is getting out that this has happened. This is a letter from the NHS talking about someone who had applied for what they call a vaccine damage payments. I know we like the word injury better than damage because damage is a terrible word, but basically they said that your claim, this person who I've kept anonymous by removing the identifying information, is that they do not believe that their claim meets the criteria for a vaccine damage payment because, in their opinion, the vaccine did cause the disability in question based on the balance of probabilities. However, whatever the damage was, as they call it, has been assessed as less than severe. And severe disablement based on some things that happened in the past, previous measures and so on, means that a vaccine injury would have caused the person to be at least 60% disabled. And since they could be, let's say, 59% disabled, the claim has therefore been rejected and the vaccine injured person is not able to access the claim for the payment. And I saw this and I was absolutely furious. So someone else sent me a link to a Freedom of Information request, which anyone can see. This is public information around this particular payment scheme. And this was as of the 2nd of April, 2024. Over 11,000 claims have been received. About 5,000 have been notified of an outcome. Only 168 of those have been able to receive a payment. Most of them were AstraZeneca. Over 4,000 were unsuccessful because they did not believe that the vaccine caused the injury, and others were unsuccessful for other reasons, for basically saying the vaccine criteria didn't meet causation. And I would say as well that with the Our World in data that I showed, that's something that we do need to remember in science and research is that correlation does not imply causation. So although we can see what we saw with the statistics through those bits of data, we do have to be careful about the claims that we can make. But some of this data is very difficult to refute. If anyone wants any more information on this, we have covered this in the past on UK Column with Peter Todd and some other individuals who have been vaccine injured. Peter has some really great information about the 60% disability and other things. So there's interviews and other things from previous news segments that you can see. And I would also refer you, of course, as I always do, to Debbie Evans, who has covered in detail the issues around the MHRA and the MHRA avoiding the issue of vaccine deaths. And as we know, they have canceled their last meeting with Dame June Rain as the CEO. We don't know why, but we do know that in her resignation letter, Dame June Rain said, "It has been an honor to lead an agency which has patient safety as its top priority." Brian?
Yes, or maybe, or maybe not. A lot more to come out about the MHRA and what they were doing at the time. But I just want to say very quickly, with respect to the payment of compensation for injuries, of course, the independent analysts who are looking at causation are not able to see the true amount of data because that's being withheld from the public. So people are being penalised twice. They get the damage of the vaccine, and then, of course, their case can't be assessed properly. That's how I see it. Diane, did you want to mention Peter Todd, the Peter Todd interview with?
Yeah, it's just to say that that's up there, and as well as if you just search for Peter Todd on the UK Column website, you will find this interview with him as well as others that has kind of, I think, featured some conversations with Debbie and other vaccine injured people and these sort of horrible obstacles that they've faced. It's absolutely an outrage. So I would encourage you for more information to follow his Twitter page as well, because he has a lot of information to share with people out there who might be vaccine injured and looking for claims that they can make or what they can do about their situation.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for that. And as always, a huge thank you to all the people who do support the UK column, because it's monthly members that keep us going. And we do want to expand UK column. A lot of people asking us to do more work, more research, produce different material. We'd like to do all of this, but to do that, we need more financial backing. So if you're already supporting us, thank you very much indeed. You're wonderful people. If you're watching us and you're thinking, well, should I or shouldn't I donate to the UK column, please do and allow us to grow. The material we're putting out is overwhelmingly to be shared, and we're very happy for you to do that. Please give us some form of acknowledgement. We just highlight that we still can't get into our Facebook account at the moment. We are trying to work on that. You can also help us by making a purchase via the UK column shop. That would be really excellent. And to highlight that Sunday, the 16th of June at 10 a.m., we've got UK column live virtual conference where the UK column team are going to be talking to our audience about how we got going, what made us do what we did and what we're still doing today, and where we want to go in the future. So if you'd like to get to know us better, join us on Sunday, 16th of June at 10 a.m. Now, we've also got an interview coming out tomorrow, which is Debbie talking to James Roguski, and of course he'll be updating things in connection with the World Health Organization. Before we move back to Mark, I'd just like to say I received a little an email which I couldn't get into the news formally, but it's from Vote Cornwall Independence. It's saying, do you know who to vote for in Cornwall? And then there's a list of those who are warning about what the World Health Organization is doing. And these are people that don't want more pandemic lockdowns, mandatory jabs. They're not convinced about the climate change agenda. They're unhappy with immigration, and they've got lots of common sense. So these people who are effectively standing as independents are Angela Rayner, who's Independent UK, Pete Lawrence, Independent Truro and Falmouth, Sarah Farrell, who's the Heritage Party North Cornwall, Roland O'Connor, Reform UK North Cornwall, Graham Cowdery, Heritage Party South East Cornwall, Roger Tarrant, I beg your pardon, Reform UK Camborne and Redruth, and Jason Saunders, UKIP Penzance and Ives and Sillies. And it ends saying, I hope that's cleared it up, but great to see people standing up in their own name to challenge the established parties. Mark, let's bring you back on, and you're going to take us into the world of open AI.
Brian, with Bilderberg still in our rearview mirror and not completely out of sight, you'll see the connection here in a few minutes. Open AI is really ascending right now, becoming more and more hardwired into our society. This Reuters headline, Open AI signs content deals with The Atlantic and Vox Media. And this is part of a much broader marriage between Open AI and the mass media cartel. We'll move on from there. And I won't get into all these slides in total detail, but there are some important elements. Sam Altman, who we'll learn about a little more in a minute, he's leading the Open AI revolution, you might say, and he has signed content and product partnerships with The Atlantic and Vox Media, helping that AI firm to boost and train its products. Why is this important? The agreements with The Atlantic and Vox come on the heels of several media firms signing similar deals, get that, thereby giving OpenAI access to their news content and archives to train AI OpenAI's large language models, that is. Such partnerships are not only crucial for the training of these AI models, they can also be lucrative for news publishers, which have traditionally been denied a slice of profits that the internet giants earn for distributing their content. And last week, OpenAI, and this is a big one, signed a deal with the massive media conglomerate and Wall Street Journal owner, News Corp. And let's learn a little bit more about News Corp. More on News Corp, founded by our friend Rupert Murdoch. It's a U.S.-based mass media and publishing company in Midtown Manhattan, operating across news media, book publishing, and cable TV. News Corp's notable assets include Dow Jones and Company, which publishes the Wall Street Journal. And then on your side of the pond, there's News UK, which publishes The Sun and The Times, and also The Sunday Times, and also the book publisher HarperCollins. Overall revenue in 2023 for News Corp, $9.88 billion. And over in the land down under, News Corp owns many news outlets, and it controls more than 150 major and smaller newspapers, weeklies and dailies across the whole of Australia, almost total saturation there. So it's a really big company getting into AI. There's a lot of ramifications. That's what I'm getting at. Now, moving on from there, News Corp's chief American assets, and there's complexities. I won't read the whole thing. Those that want to freeze the slides can read more about the maneuvering and chess moving, you might say, of these media giants and who buys what and who owns what. But in terms of U.S.-based news media, News Corp also owns the New York Post, Barron's, MarketWatch, Investors Business Daily, Private Equity News, Dow Jones Newswires, Dow Jones Indexes, and get this, 10% ownership of the Dow Jones Industrial Average itself, and about 7 other Dow Jones entities. Very interesting. A lot of media power there, a lot of diversity, you might say, within their company. Moving on from there, we have some other important matters to cover. This is just a sundry item. News Corp was actually born there in England, 1785. Their story began there. The Daily Universal Register, later renamed The Times, was launched. So it's an iconic brand, they say, with a legacy that spans centuries. Moving on, this is the official News Corp press release on the deal with OpenAI. They're calling it a landmark deal, a multi-year global partnership, in fact. So News Corp and OpenAI announced as of May 22nd a historic multi-year agreement to bring News Corp news content to OpenAI. Through this partnership, OpenAI has permission to display content from News Corp News Corp mastheads in response to user questions and to enhance its products with the ultimate objective of providing people the ability to make informed choices based on reliable information, they say, and news sources. OpenAI will receive access to current and archived content from News Corp's major outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, MarketWatch, Investors Business Daily, FN, and the New York Post, the Times, the Sunday Times, the Sun, the Australian outlets I mentioned, many items there. In addition to providing content, News Corp will share journalistic expertise to help ensure the highest journalism standards are present, they say, across OpenAI's offering. Very interesting stuff. Context, Vox Media owns The Verge and Vulture, lots of offbeat and avant-garde publications. There's websites, there's streaming services, so Vox is a bit different than some of the others. And Vox is saying that OpenAI will help the company develop its products for consumers and advertising, etc. OpenAI will get access to Vox Media's archives and so on. Separately, The Atlantic, the globalist rag that's been around way too long, also announced a similar deal giving OpenAI access to the publisher's content. The Atlantic said it's creating, quote, an experimental microsite called Atlantic Labs that will also pilot OpenAI's tech, helping the media firm explore how OpenAI can drive development of new products and features. And I think we have a quote coming up here. Well, first we have a little description of Sam Altman and what is OpenAI and what is ChatGPT. What is that bot? Well, Samuel Harris Altman, Brian, is 39 years old. He's an American entrepreneur and investor, best known as the CEO of OpenAI since 2019, considered one of the leading figures of the AI boom. OpenAI says it's an AI research and deployment company, quote unquote. Our mission is to ensure that artificial general intelligence, which is a common phrase now, not just artificial intelligence, but artificial general intelligence. And that means what they see as AI systems generally considered to be smarter than humans benefits all of humanity, quote unquote. And ChatGPT is a chatbot and virtual assistant developed by OpenAI and launched on the 30th of November in 2022. Based on large language models, it enables users to refine and steer a conversation toward a desired length, format, style, level of detail, and language. So there's some interesting background. And we'll kind of start winding up and summarizing a little bit. This is Nicholas Thompson, the CEO of The Atlantic, and he said, quote, "There's a lot of fear in the media industry about partnering with tech platforms. But I am absolutely convinced," he says, "that these deals can be beneficial, for whom, we wonder, if we've learned the right rules, structure them the right way, and hedge our bets." That's what he had to say. And going on from there, a little bit more from Reuters, OpenAI to use Financial Times content for training AI models in another media tie-up. And there's OpenAI's official logo there. The Financial Times has signed a deal, it says here from Reuters, with OpenAI to license its content for the development of AI models and allow this ChatGPT to answer queries with summaries attributable to the newspaper. This latest tie-up is saying financial terms of the agreement are not disclosed. The latest deal will help the startup enhance the GPT chatbot with archived content from the Financial Times, and the firms will work together, OpenAI and Financial Times, to develop new AI products and features for Financial Times readers, and so on and so forth. So to keep going from there, this is a brief summary that I wrote that is intended to be a longer Bilderberg long view article that I'll soon be submitting, like what I submitted late last summer, looking at Bilderberg beyond the meetings. This is the start of that article. One need not be overly suspicious, I wrote, to realize that the annual Bilderberg meetings, the 70th such meeting in 70 years, recently concluded in Madrid, with AI heavily represented among its attendees, apparently function as an incubator for megatrends that have a strong tendency to quickly leave the conceptual realm and hardwire themselves into society. Case in point, just as this year's Bilderberg gathering came and went, headlines were and still are popping up frequently to announce that OpenAI, a company owned by longtime Bilderberg regular Sam Altman, is making scores of deals with media companies that will enable its chatbot to access the news content of those companies. Exactly what such partnerships will mean in terms of how news is formulated and presented, and how journalists, working journalists, and the legal landscape may be affected, that is not altogether clear yet, I wrote there. And continuing a little more, I won't get into the whole thing. Those news organizations with more than a fleeting linkage to Bilderberg are Germany-based Axel Springer, the parent company of the journal Politico, which is influential on Capitol Hill in the U.S., The Atlantic magazine, represented at Bilderberg every year by former Washington Post writer Anne Applebaum, of course, the Financial Times, which is also tied into the Global Cities movement in Chicago, Le Monde, a major French newspaper represented at Bilderberg several times, and Prisa Media, a Spanish media conglomerate, that also has popped up at Bilderberg. And winding down here, it's interesting to note that OpenAI, Brian, OpenAI.com is the website, collaborated with Georgetown University and with Stanford to do a study on disinformation. And here we thought that AI was going to be largely a benevolent thing. Well, I looked at it a little bit. There are a number of miscellaneous uses that anyone could find somewhat handy, it's true. But the people developing it and the people making these media deals are looking deeper at the disinformation issue. And we'll move on from there to explain very briefly what that is. All of that, and eventually funneled, Brian, through Cornell University, which is in Ithaca, New York. And they came up with this study, generative language models and automated influence operations, emerging threats and potential mitigations. And what they're basically saying is they don't want AI to end up in the wrong hands with disinformation change agents and online influence peddlers, because they might contradict the globalist party line. That's what they're saying. So they're burning the midnight oil to try and prevent that from happening. And in this last slide, it's worth noting, and this sort of reflects a little bit of what Diane got into, Moderna is also plugged in with OpenAI, and I can imagine that'll have some downside to it in terms of where that will lead. So maybe we can talk about it a little more in extra, Brian, but that's how it's shaping up so far. Back to you.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much. And of course, the immense power of those organizations in not only media, but AI now being unleashed to support the political parties fighting for election. Meanwhile, smaller organizations do their best without the power of AI. Right, let's move back to Diane, and you're having a look at facts and non-facts, reality and non-reality. A fake Kate, question mark. Are you muted, Diane?
Oh, sorry. Where is the fake Kate and where is the real Kate? And do either one of them exist at this point in 2024? This was from the cover of Us magazine from this month, asking how is she doing? And some other sources have said, quote, never come back in the same way people saw her as before, I think is what it says. So what exactly is going on with Kate? Well, let's get into that a little bit. And to do that, we are going to go back to AI. So continuing my coverage from last week on Fully Facted, can I say that, Brian? The AI edition of Full Fact this week, because AI is something that Full Fact says that they've been working on very hard for the last several years. I would like to note as well that even though some of the new algorithms are out there and processing power is faster than what it was in the past, that the basic idea and the basic working of artificial intelligence started back with Alan Turing in the 1950s. So this has been around for quite a while. And so it's certainly not anything new in terms of a new paradigm or new anything else. There's just maybe some advantages to, as I said, processing power and algorithm design. But I want to go back to Tim Gordon, who I briefly mentioned last week as a trustee of Full Fact and the co-founder of Best Practice AI. Not too much on him, but just as a reminder, he is tied in with the World Economic Forum. He wrote some toolkits and some other pieces of information for how to look at how the WEF can incorporate AI into what they are doing. And so I can't say that we entirely trust him. He is, however, a trustee of Full Fact. And again, not to go into too much detail, but just to say that this is an example of the toolkit that he was part of creating. He was a contributor to this AI C-suite toolkit, empowering AI leadership. And honestly, this is I think, 120-page PDF, which you can find online. And I tried to go into some basic understanding of what it was trying to do and got really confused. It's really boring. It's all very conceptual, but these graphics that I've got here are something that he contributed to directly through Best Practice AI, for whatever it's worth. And so Google itself has been doing a lot of funding of Full Fact and fact-checking. And there's a lot of examples of this on their website of how Google has given them money to build the automated fact-checking tools. They were included in Google search results for a while, but they got rid of it because they realized it was rubbish and wasn't really doing anything useful except maybe making things more complicated. 2019 is the most recent time when I can see that Google donated money to Full Fact. And it says here it was all part of winning the AI Impact Challenge, just one of 20 winners out of over 2,600 entrants. And they said what they're going to do with this money is to work with experts to figure out how AI could transform fact-checking at scale and to create and deploy and evaluate these tools. So what is Google involved with now? We'll come back to Full Fact and everything for just a minute, but what they've said here is that now they are funding $25 million with an open call to use AI to accelerate progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. So again, is this really independent? Is this truly factual? Or is this in fact biased in some way? Well, we can talk about that later. So going back to Full Fact AI, now that Google has given them this money and they've done this work, they have created a set of tools to alleviate pain points that we experience in the fact-checking process. And so what does it do? Well, there's a way that you can sign up to test the Full Fact tools and you can apply them yourselves. I will say a couple of weeks ago, I signed up to get access to the Full Fact AI tools to play with them myself by saying that I was a member of the media through UK Column. And for some strange reason, they have not given me access to those tools yet. I can't possibly imagine why. But these are the main steps that are identified: collecting, monitoring data, identify and label claims, match the claims, real-time checks, and publish the results. That's the basics of what they say that they are doing. So what can AI fact check? Well, that's an interesting question. Here's something that came up in it was from the Irish Guards from a few days ago. This letter from Kate saying, well, what is it that can be corrected? What is she wrote this letter, it's full of errors. And we also see as well that when in some of the mainstream media sources that talked about this letter, both through the BBC and through, I think it was The Independent, where they either corrected her writing, if it was Kate's writing. In fact, we don't really know, but it was signed Colonel Catherine, but we don't know. And so we have to wonder, if it was truly the Princess of Wales who wrote that, wouldn't somebody be involved in making sure that she had correct grammar and spelling before it went out to the Irish Guards? We see here the user-generated AI Kate, and we're going to watch a video of this, which has been claimed to be a user-generated AI, because someone asked me if we can, in fact check the Kate cancer video, which was the famous one put out officially, produced apparently at BBC Studios, saying, well, there is a cancer video. Can we fact check? Does this happen? Does her arm move? And these kinds of things. So, but let's see the definitely AI-generated Kate video now, if we have that, please.
On the 25th of December 2023, I made my last public appearance with my family at their Sandringham estate in Norfolk, England. It has now been over 5 months and I have not been seen in public, nor have I been seen with my children who mean so much to me. The photos and videos that have been released have been AI manipulated, including the audio which you are listening to. Please keep asking questions. Something is not right and you might still be able to help. Thank you.
So again, we know that was an AI-generated Kate that was admitted. We have Photoshop Kate, which again was admitted by the Prince and Princess of Wales, saying that she Photoshopped this photo of herself and her children. That was the Mother's Day photo, and we see there that some people have said, well, this is this Vogue magazine cover that her face came from, and so this has been spreading all over the internet with different memes and so on. It's kind of making fun of the whole situation, unfortunately. But what I want to say about fact-checking videos in particular, I tried a couple of things. First, I wanted to test ChatGPT, which runs based on OpenAI. And OpenAI said, well, first of all, I asked, is she dead? And they said, well, no, she's not dead. There have been no reports or official announcements. Okay. And then I asked, is the Kate cancer video real? And said, well, no, it's despite speculation and conspiracy theories, it is real and not AI generated. And it goes on to explain it was produced by BBC Studios. We've looked at high resolution versions. We've done a lot of analysis. And according to these 3 different sources that they've cited here, one of them being Full Fact, we cannot say that it was a deepfake or an AI generated video. So I went to that Full Fact source and just clicked on that link right there. And what did it say to us? On the next slide, we can see, no, we can't currently fact check for AI or deepfakes with video. It's just not possible. We don't have the tools to do it, even though Full Fact claims that they do have the ability to fact check. And no, her ring does not vanish. It's all totally fine. But we actually know that the technology does not yet exist to check videos in particular for AI or deepfakes. And I certainly don't think that Full Fact saying that they can is a true statement, because as we know, the technology isn't there for anyone to do it, no matter how much money you've been provided from Google. This is actually from OpenAI itself, or from an organization associated with using the OpenAI technology. Right there, it says, unfortunately, we have no reliable AI video detector at the moment. So there's a bit of a contradiction here going on. And I think we can see here that we need to maybe not trust full fact, potentially. And here's a bonus, UKC Verify. This was at the request of Debbie, who kept asking me when I was working on Kate and AI over the weekend, what about Carol Middleton? Is that true? Because we've seen online, she was in a car accident. Well, this was on a fake website, a fake news website called Birmingham Gist or Birmingham Gist, however you want to say that. And if you look at their X account, we see that they have about 30 followers, including, as of yesterday, they were able to provide a detailed account of the death of Michael Mosley, even though there's still a lot of speculation around what really happened with his life. And if you look at other websites, it's made all kinds of ridiculous claims. So please check your sources. Go back to the original source before you share anything or start spreading these ideas.
Okay, Diane, thank you very much for that. I think that brings us up to the end of the news today, but thank you very much for your segment there. Obviously, we're living in an increasingly difficult world, working out what is true and what's not true. UK Column is going to do our very best to try and make sure that the material we are publishing we can verify. And we're going to challenge the organisations who say we should trust them. And full fact, personally, I don't trust, but we'll continue to see what they do. But Diane, thank you for your work on that. And also, Mark, thank you for the update on AI. As you were taking us through that, I was simply thinking to myself, yep, these are the huge global media corporations who are there supporting the politicians, trying to get them re-elected. And of course, it's a huge weight of their publicity and media streams, which can swing ballots, whether it's in the US or UK. So to my mind, we need to get these media companies under control and out of politics, but maybe more on that another day. So I'm going to say to you both, thank you for joining me, and also a huge thank you to our audience, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for being with UK Column, and a huge thank you to the people who make this possible by a monthly subscription. We'll leave it there. We will be back in a few moments for UK Column Extra, and we'll have a look at that musical video in relation to Israel, and we've also got other subjects to cover. So join us then. Thank you. Bye-bye.